Hello, this is wmpyr, here to talk about the Tai Chi master versus MMA fighter. This was the fight that had the general public in China was really upset about this, and I guess understandably so, because I think the general public expected the Tai Chi master to win or at least put up a really good fight, and none of that happened. What happened was he got utterly destroyed and crushed very quickly. He got demolished so fast. If this was like a street type situation, it just looked like he got assaulted and crushed. That's what it looked like. Just violence was put on him. So he would have been a street victim, no problem. So from a self-defense perspective, it's a total fail. From a fight perspective, it's a total fail. So yeah, I can understand the general public being very upset about this, just because it's a violent video. And on top of that, the general public probably expected the honorable Tai Chi master who represented their culture, their beautiful culture, and the history and all that, to have won, because he's more respectable and honorable and he's the good guy, or something like that. In other words, too much movie watching. Yeah, and I blame movies and TV shows for this. You watch that, and even though people know that stuff is fake, they still don't really know, because if they really knew, then you understand that movie stuff is so far from reality that it's complete fantasy, that you cannot even compare that to a real life. And it has nothing to do with really the techniques, because in the techniques you see being used in the film, punching, kicking, and even in some newer films like Donnie Yen type stuff, you could see some grappling stuff. You could see arm bars, you could see on the ground and stuff like that, But it's not about the techniques. That fight is fake. It's a movie. It's not real. It's nothing like reality, That's the problem. I think people don't know the difference because of Hollywood, because of film, movies, TV shows. They don't understand the difference. So you got people watching martial arts demonstrations and going, "Oh, that looks real. That looks like it would work in a street." Dude, you don't know what you're talking about. That's a demonstration. It's fake as hell. And that's the problem. People talking way beyond their way beyond their bubble. You shouldn't be crossing these lines. You shouldn't be saying stuff like that. I hear people that they don't even know what real fighting is like, talking about "Oh yeah, this guy Michael Jai White would be great," and you don't know. We don't know. So you gotta let all that go. And making these kinds of assumptions makes you the Tai Chi guy who assumed, I'm pretty sure he assumed that he was going to do great against the MMA fighter. He probably thought he was going to win. That's because he made these false assumptions, all right? People are making too many assumptions. What was that in the Steven Seagal movie? They said, assumptions is the mother of all fuck-ups. There you go, So stop making assumptions. What you gotta do, obviously, what the Tai Chi fighter needed to do was he needed to spar full contact, and from there, that's the easiest way. I don't think it's the only way, but that's one of the things he needed to do, was just spar full contact as much as possible with as many different people as possible. Not punch me, I'm the head guy in the class, you're my student, and dude, you're doing a demonstration to teach people. That's completely has nothing to do with real fighting. So the problem was, I'm sure he knows his stuff, but that's knowledge. Completely different from applied knowledge. So that's the problem, where people think that if you have enough knowledge that you will be able to apply it, and that's wrong. That is totally wrong. That's not right. So we have to make that separation between knowledge and applied knowledge. That guy, the Tai Chi master, if he's a traditional martial artist, his main goal is to learn the style as much as possible of the style, like every little thing as much as possible, learn everything about the style, and then learn it to the highest quality as possible and pass it on. That's his job. Nothing more, nothing less. Pass it on to the right people, so that they can pass it on. That's what a tradition is. That's traditional martial arts. Fighter is totally different from that. They don't need 100,000 moves. They don't need 100 moves. They just need 1 or 2, 3 moves that are excellent. And then what they need to do is to fight different people and learn how to adapt to different people. That's what a fighter does, okay, in that venue. A street fighter might be a little bit different. It might be someone who's super deceptive. Maybe even they act like they're super weak, and then when the person comes, they sucker punch them. So they're a master at sucker punching somebody. That's one move, and then after that, they need to be vicious and non-stop destroy the person, because a regular person, or maybe even the Tai Chi master, if he's never been into a fight, you punch somebody, they're bleeding and they're on the floor, it's difficult to finish someone like that. If you've never done it before, you go, whoa, I think he's already hurt bad. No, and you're already giving the guy chances to come back at you. That happened to me, so unless you've done fighting like this, you're gonna make all the beginner mistakes. This dude obviously, from the video footage, looks like to me like he has never been in a fight. So that's the problem. That's a big problem. So you being a fighter is totally different from someone who just retains knowledge at a high quality, even if it's at a high quality. It's two different things. Now the next argument, I know people are going to say, I'm past the 10-minute mark, but I know people are going to say that combat sports, MMA, Muay Thai, Judo, Sambo, all that stuff, that it has rules, it's not real fighting, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, you're right to an extent. You're right to an extent, but compared to anything else in the martial arts world, that's the most real. That's the point that you're missing. Yeah, it's not completely real because there's no chairs, there's no concrete, there's referees, there's rules. You can't bite the person, you can't take out a gun and shoot the guy in the face, you can't do stuff like that, of course, obviously. So in that sense, it makes it less real. Okay, I get that, I understand that. However, compared to anything else we have, it's the most real. Now you can do other kinds of training that I've seen, like, maybe Krav Maga, people will wear stuff, armor and stuff like that, but then that makes it unreal in certain areas, but more real in other areas, because now you could use a baton or whatever, Now, the other thing is, what a lot of people are missing is the people who do traditional martial arts, what they do is demonstrations, right? That's choreography, and the training is like one-step sparring and stuff like that. It's super controlled, so it's not full contact sparring. The reason why they do that, what a lot of people that criticize traditional martial arts is missing and they don't understand, is that when you can't do full contact sparring, that's the next best thing, is choreography training, okay, to do the theatrical stuff. That's the next best thing to full contact fighting or full contact sparring. All right, that's what a lot of people don't get. Now, the reason why they do that in traditional martial arts is because, remember, medical science was not as good, 100 years ago compared to what it is today. So, you could just be walking down the forest and wolves can attack you. So in that case, you had to be very, very careful with your health. You could, if it got cold, you could die from, a common cold back then, a lot more probable than today. So if life is that difficult, you have to take care of yourself even more, and you have to take care of your partners even more. Because also, when you're 50 years old or 60, 70 years old, if you even live that long, you still have to protect the village from raiders, from Vikings or whatever. It didn't matter. This is for your whole life. You have to defend the village. If you hurt each other in training, now, if an army came in to attack, you're part of that now, and you got to go in there with injuries and stuff. So it makes sense. It makes sense that they didn't do that kind of training. For today, we're fighting a lot of times. These MMA fighters are fighting for careers and stuff, and they understand their career is going to be short. They're not going to do it lifelong. Not all of them. Most of them don't. Most of them don't last that long. That's okay for a career, but if it's like to defend your village, that's not okay. So even today, I would argue and say, like, I'm 41 years old right now, about to be 42 this year, and I am glad I'm not doing combat sport training. I'm glad I'm not doing MMA. I'm glad I'm not doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or that stuff, because I don't want to get hurt. I sustained way too many injuries in the past before, and now I really, really enjoy my Eskrima training. And don't get me wrong, I still train in Muay Thai and whatnot on my own, but hitting the bag and stuff, I'm not going to pretend like I'm a Muay Thai kickboxer, because the training that I do is nothing compared to what those guys really do. And what those guys really do, if you do that, that's a young man's sport, and you're going to get injured bad, and at my age, that's just silly. I'm not going to go compete. I don't need that in my life just to try to make me a better fighter. It's not necessary. I already did the fight training, and however far I got, it is what it is. So now I'm just living to preserve my life, to make my life, whatever is left of it, as best quality as I can. So that's what's interesting to me. That's my goal now, But so for anyone that really wants to know what it's like to fight, go do MMA, go do fight training. But my advice to you is get out of it as fast as you can. And then from there, go into like Tai Chi and stuff. It'll heal your micro injuries that you get from that kind of sport training. And when you are older, 50 and on, it'll teach you how to fight at that age with your new body. Because MMA fighting is designed for a younger, fit person, which, you can't sustain that. 5% body fat, with muscle and all that. How long can you sustain that? Can you sustain that at age 60? It's very difficult. Some people can, but I'm saying it's very, very difficult. So, and the training required to keep that, it's a lot of strain on the body. The dieting is also very, very difficult as well. So, when you think about that, Tai Chi is not useless. There is a place for it. Pretty much like the way, if you follow the Kung Fu methodology, you start with something like Wushu, which will, at a young age, it'll teach you to be flexible, acrobatic. I mean, these are things I wish I had, because by the time I got to my 20s and stuff, my athleticism would have gone higher. I would have been much more athletic, but I couldn't because I was super sick when I was a kid. But I'm just saying, the ones that do Wushu type training at a relatively young age, you're going to be ahead of the curve. And then once like junior high, high school, around that age, you go into something like Wing Chun, and you start thinking about self-defense. You start thinking about like what is self-defense in that kind of fighting, real life situation. What kind of techniques do I use? And you start thinking more seriously along those lines. When you're like in college age, that's when you go into full contact and do something like Sanda, test your skills out. All the ideas that you developed when you were in high school and stuff, now you go test it out by doing full contact. Sanda, Sanshao, something along those lines, right? And then from there, now that you're going to have injuries if you've done that, if you've competed and you've sparred full contact against people and stuff, you've had challenge matches, you're going to be injured, okay? Even the training alone is going to be a lot harder. So after that, you're going to have all kinds of micro injuries and stuff. So something like Tai Chi would be great. So this is like, now you're at the age of like 40. And it helps you make that transition into older age. And you're able to do techniques and strategies now that fit the older age. So you're not doing the stuff that you did back when you were in your 20s and stuff. So that makes perfect sense to me. If you look at it from that way, then all those styles work together, right? So it's not like just getting Tai Chi, putting him up against an MMA fighter and saying, go for it. That's silly, you know? So it's like knowing what tools, because to me a style is just a tool, knowing what tool fits in at what time, when to use the right tool, in other words, you know? So if you have a realistic perception, you're going to know that. You're going to know when to use what tool. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for watching, and take care, folks.